You're probably not exactly sure what's going to happen right now. Well, that's okay. It's going to happen, so here we go. I'm not going to spend a long time telling you exactly what it is. And if you saw this table up here, that really piqued your curiosity, like, okay, is today about splitting wood? Well, in all honesty, that's a good question. This is not, they have up the road here coming up at a homesteading conference where they have the guys that are really outstanding at those different arts, and they're ready there to mentor you in that. And that's a wonderful thing. This is not going to be the hardcore mentoring in any particular art. In my mind, this is the background. This is going to be the principles of why a certain approach of life in the home is so important. So most of all, I want to tell you right from the start, what the goal is to get you thinking a certain way. You're probably already thinking that way. It always behooves us to think more, to look more deeply into the principles. The more we understand them, the more we'll be inspired to live in a certain way, and the more that we'll be in a position to do what God has designed us to do, to use our reason to figure out best how to do it. And so we're going to both be at kind of a general level here today, and then given what those general principles are, we're going to see why it's so important that we do narrow in, and things like having a really nice mallet actually make a difference in life. It's not about the mallet, it's about life. But a mallet makes a difference in life because of how God designed us. So, my lecture is going to be more focused on men, but it's going to have something for everybody. Sophia's is going to be more focused on the ladies, and it's going to have something for everybody. When a man gets married, everything changes. When a man gets married, everything changes. And men, when they get married, I think have a vague sense of that, a very sure sense. They know that by what I've done today, everything now will be different. But on the day they get married, it's not at all clear in their minds how or even necessarily why it has changed, but just that it has. And it is up to us to now focus and try to realize more wherever we are, whether we're before that day, whether we're close still to that day, whether we're well beyond that day. In a sense, that day is the key day, and I say this to you too. The change that should happen, it doesn't always happen. The change that should happen when you get married, in a sense, an objective change has happened that now demands something more, but doesn't necessarily follow that we're going to do it. But that change that happens on that day is a change that needs to happen in every human male person. Whether you get married or not, you are called to be a husband. And we're going to have to talk about that word. This is part of the beauty of this. I love to say to my students in philosophy, words are always very important. The richness of words we need to spend time on. But the richness of words, ladies and gentlemen, comes from the richness of reality. It's never just about the words, it's always about the reality. Words are rich because reality is rich. There's a lot of richness that goes into the different ways that we use the term husband. And I'm going to primarily start to use the word husbandman, so that it's clear that we're not just talking about a man who is married. Every man needs to become a husbandman. In an astounding plan, it's so generous, so amazing, so demanding. The most obvious natural vocation that men enter into is that of getting married. Isn't it fascinating? We learn so much by this. By God's design, just by doing that, you now are intrinsically and absolutely and clearly demanded to change. Those men who don't get married have a particular challenge of their own that they're going to have to discern how they can still change in that way even if they don't get married. Now, for some, that's going to be by a higher vocation that will likewise demand of them that they become a husbandman. And my focus is going to be on the challenge as it comes out in the context of marriage. But I want to make clear from the start, if one isn't married, the idea isn't, well, okay, now what do I do? Well, I mean, there's some aspect, okay, how are you going to do this? Fine. But the fundamental principles are going to remain the same. All that we do as a man now, so let's get in the zone of, I'm now married. What fundamentally has changed? All that I do is shot through with a new meaning. Everything I do from the moment I get up in the morning to when I go to bed now should be fundamentally about, first of all, her, and then also, hopefully in God's providence, them. Now it is apparent that everything that I do is a way of taking care of them. This is the new view that one gets into life, but it's really just a new view into the greater fullness of what it is to be human. Because that is human life, really, to serve these other people. And the astounding thing is, in God's great providence, we're not angels, we're humans. To take care of people always involves and includes in it taking care of things. So the fundamental principle for my presentation is going to be this. A husbandman is one who takes care of things as a way of taking care of people. That is who a husbandman is. It's always, first of all, about people. But because it's about people, all of these seemingly insignificant details, all of these things take on a greater meaning. It gives you chills when you think about that. All of the physical aspects of life now have importance because it's all part of how I'm taking care of them. Think about how, obviously, the home, the household, is where this becomes so clear. Things in service of people. Things in service of people. Husbandry is always about bringing persons to their true end, to their true fulfillment, their true flourishing. And part of that, essential to that, irreplaceable in that, is using things in a certain kind of way to aid in that bringing of the people to their flourishing. Everything has a place in the symphony that is husbandry. Everything has a place in the symphony that is husbandry. This is not to speak loosely. This is to speak with philosophical precision. And the more we see this, the more we're actually seeing the way things are. We're not yet discovering what's actually there until we realize how everything in my life is shot through with meaning that connects it all together if I see it and enact it. That's how it's supposed to be. Husbandry and wifery especially highlight this truth, how everything in life is interconnected and shot through with meaning. What an astounding plan. It's always good to go back to it. Who could possibly have thought of such a thing? That there'll be this kind of overarching art, and then all the little arts that we'll talk about that will be part of the overarching art in their complementary way in husbandry and wifery of crafting a good human life. All right, what's my plan? My plan is I'm going to define husbandry, and we've kind of already started to do that, but it will be rather straightforward given the background I've just given, and then address its central role in human life. And then very simply, I'm going to offer some steps to renewing husbandry in our lives, or to becoming better husbandmen ourselves. But just one more quick background point. Living in a home, ladies and gentlemen, is directly analogous to how God is in the whole universe. May I put it to you this way? By learning to be a husbandman in your home, which is always the place to learn it. That's where husbandry comes home to roost. That's where husbandry is most itself, in the home. To learn that is to learn how God acts towards us, how God acts in the universe. God is a husbandman in the whole universe. And indeed, this is so beautiful. This whole plan that we're talking about, that you and I discover when we are willing to enter into what, for instance, marriage is, that's all part of God's plan of husbandry, that He has set it up. Picture, if you could set up your home perfectly, in your home life perfectly, so that your children would step by step just be brought to discover and become who they are if they just kind of go along with the plan that you have in the home. That's exactly what God has done in the universe. If we are willing to go along with the plan and enter into it and make it our own, God is husbanding us. Now, you ready for this? So this morning, I just opened the scripture, and I just kind of, I go along, and where was I in this morning's completely accidentally? 15th chapter of the Gospel of St. John, first verse, get a load of this. The first line, I am the true vine, and then in the Latin, it says, et pater meus agricola est. They look over at the translation, and my Father is the husbandman. Jesus said, pater meus, my Father, agricola est. Another translation of that is, my Father, He's a farmer. You can translate agricola in different ways. In any case, my Father, He's a husbandman. That's what He does. All right. I've given you a quotation sheet, which we're not going to be able to go through all of them. Honestly, I think you're going to find that these quotations might rock your world a little bit. They're gems. I'm hoping you're going to take this home, and most of you are here with spouses, whatever your condition, read them together, discuss them. It's going to give you some rich material. Some of them we're going to look at, and I'm going to read you the first one. A number of them happen to be from Wendell Berry. And I'm just going to say this. He has unique insight, in my experience, into this. He's not a perfect thinker. He's not even a philosopher. He's more of a literary man. But in any case, I think he's seen some key things. and in any case, very much worth our consideration. Quotation number 1. Husbandry pertains first to the household. It connects the farm to the household. It's an art wedded to the art of housewifery. To husband is to use with care, to keep, to save, to make last, to conserve. Old usage tells us that there is a husbandry also of the land, of the soil, of the domestic plants and animals. Obviously, because of the importance of these things to the household. Boom, there it is. So powerfully said. All of that husbandry of things, obviously we husband them because of the importance of these things to the household. I just take that to be his way of saying it's always about people. It's about the flourishing of the people. Here's my definition of husbandry. Husbandry is how a man takes care of things as a way of taking care of people in a masculine mode. Husbandry is a way a man takes care of things as a way of taking care of people in a masculine mode. And in the primary instance of it is in the household, and that's where we're going to talk about it. The word husband, by the way, is from the Old Norse, which literally meant one who dwells in a house. I think it's exceedingly instructive when every man is called to be one who dwells in a home. Let's just note a few common characteristics of what we might call a husbandman. This is just a sketch. This is in no way a perfect picture, but let's just throw some things out there that might come to mind. Such a man has a strong sense of responsibility. First of all, for the people in his home. He would never give the people in his home the leftovers of his heart and attention. A husband takes care of things. And you can tell he takes care of things when you see the spaces in which he lives, especially his home. He takes care of things. He does things right the first time, whether anyone's looking. In what he does and make, he crafts beauty just because. He is satisfied with enough as regards material things. He's satisfied with enough. He doesn't fall into the trap of pursuing more and more. Why? Because intuitively he knows that would undermine how he cares for the people. He appreciates the importance of leisure, but does not avoid work. He knows that good work and true leisure are mutually dependent, and he leans into both of them. He doesn't think that life will begin or even necessarily get better when he doesn't have to work anymore. He might look forward to retiring from his paying job, but that's only because he wants to work more in his home. He knows that everything is interconnected, and so the little things have importance to him, and he acts like it. That's my little sketch for you of what a husbandman looks like. By a natural order, husbandry is first exercised, first seen, by a natural order. It doesn't obviously always happen. You first see it when your father does it, and it strikes you. And ideally, as a child, you are invited into it by him. As a man, you really then learn it by doing it, especially in your own home, starting most of all after that day on which everything changed. The attitude of husbandry, which I suggest should be a man's attitude towards everything. It begins from how he lives in his home. It should be the archetype of his attitude towards life that overflows into everything else. Let me say now, I think one of the best ways, a little scary, pardon me, one of the best ways to understand the disjointed, bifurcated, divided life of men today is that the professional world and the professional context in which so many of us have to spend so much time often demands of us a kind of anti-husbandry. It cultivates in us dispositions that are at odds with the list that I just gave. That's one of the main reasons that many men are not really men that take care and put first things first, because that's not the context that is most common in our professional life. So God forbid this kind of anti-husbandry in the professional realm very often in us men's lives washes back into our home rather than an attitude of husbandry from our home emanating out and changing what we do outside the home. Let's talk about some general action steps. The first action step I'd like to suggest is, and I'm going to go from the more universal to the more particular. Unify your life in view of what matters. Unify your life in view of what matters. But husbandry is a symphony. A symphony requires great organization of seeing what's most important and ordering all else in view of that. Wendell Berry, if you'll take a look at quotation number 5, towards the bottom of the first side, husbandry is the name of all the practices that sustain life by connecting conservingly to our places and our world. It is the art of keeping tied all the strands in the living network that sustains us. I loved that image. Husbandry is an art of tying together strands. But tying together strands only works when we know what we're tying them together for. Another place, Wendell Berry writes that husbandry is a competent acceptance of true ends, taking them as giving meaning to everything else. This is Aristotle. This is St. Thomas Aquinas. This is human life. Seeing what's most important, seeing how that gives order, form, and meaning, purpose, context for everything else. Husbandry always goes back to the question, why am I doing this? Why does it matter? A husbandman is always deeply aware of the end, and he unifies his life into a symphony around it, and he does all he can to unify the life of those for whom he cares into an ordered whole. Why am I doing this? Why does this matter? Can I give you an image? Men, if you are married, I'm going to invite you to go back to the day. Indeed, why don't you go back to the moment that you proposed? And I want you to think for a moment about what you told her. You told her you wanted to do something very big and very specific. Though you perhaps were not exactly sure what that was, you told her that. You said, I want to make something really special with you. And that's going to be at the center of my life. I'm going to invite you to remember that and go back to that again and again. Because remember, you could say, that's when she said yes. In a sense, that's the day everything changed. Really, let's stick with the day that everything changed is the day that that was completed, where you definitively said yes. And interesting, the man always goes first. He always says, I do first. If he doesn't say it, there's nothing for her to say. It's not accidental that the man says the vow first. So he's promising something, he's offering something. I'd like to suggest we need to spend the rest of our lives asking ourselves and trying to remind ourselves, what did we promise and how are we following through on that? Are we ready, willing, and focusing on crafting a life together with, in some very important sense, for her? You're a husband. It's who you are. It changed everything. We have to be true to that. We have to be true to her. We have to be true to them. And our sons, if we do, our sons will rightly look to us and want to be like us. And our daughters will look and want to find a man like that. If we simply do what we said we would. And that's why I go back to this step is unify your life in view of what matters. Let me put it this way. I'm not trying to reduce a man's life down to only marriage, and certainly not reducing a man's life down to just what goes on in the home. But I will put it this way. That's the center thread. It's the central, concrete, defining promise. It's the one that will overflow. Men will have much to do outside the home. Let's be clear on that. But again, what our attitude towards what's outside the home is incubated, formed in what we do in the home. We should be husbandmen wherever we go. And the heart of that is what we do in our home. So, unify our life in view of what matters. And I say specifically, let's think in terms of what did we promise when we proposed and when we said I do. Step 2, then choose, first of all, this is just a little bit more specific, and very much the same line, to be a husband in your home. Remember, husbandry is always, first of all, about people. And again, it takes care of things as a way of taking care of people. And by divine plan, that starts in your home. This is where now, ladies and gentlemen, we start to get more concrete. The traditional arts of the home are the natural context to grow in husbandry. I say to you again, the traditional arts of the home are the obvious natural context where you practice and grow in husbandry. The little things matter. That we focus on some of these arts is going to be very important. It's not going to be automatic, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't happen simply by growing a garden, or by hunting, or raising animals, or handcrafting something in wood. You have to bring the husband's attitude, of which we're speaking now, to these arts. You have to bring the husbandman's attitude to these arts. These arts, which then well done, will help draw out and cultivate that husbandman's attitude in us. If we do that, then you and your arts and your loved ones and your home will come alive. That's my main assertion to you here today. If we make a firm choice to have a certain kind of life in our home, it will at least offer our children the possibility of something different. I'm going to read you quotation number 2 from the handout. Again, it's Wendell Berry. Number 2, and it's surely the duty of the older generation to be in older generation. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about you, because you need to have a certain wisdom of age that has been broadly lost. It surely is the duty of the older generation to be embarrassingly old-fashioned. Are you ready for that? Are you ready to be embarrassingly old-fashioned? For the claims of the newness of any younger generation are mostly frivolous. The real failure is to give in. If we make our house a household instead of a motel, provide healthy nourishment for mind and body, enforce moral distinctions and restraints, teach essential skills and disciplines, and require their use, there's no certainty that we're providing our children a better life that they will embrace wholeheartedly during their childhood, but we are providing them a choice they may make intelligently as adults. I think that's brilliant, and I think it says a whole lot. What you do in your home, in any case, can offer your children an option. They will do as they will do. But if they've seen something specific, they at least tend to have more than the freedom to be able to choose that themselves because they've seen it done. And their desires might have been formed in such a way that they're saying, yes, I want that. And again, I say to you, it's not about a vegetable or an axe or a stone or a tool. It's about the people and the dispositions and the kind of life you can give them if we focus on that life and then embody it in these natural arts that by a natural plan are the natural contexts for husbandry. Step 3, choose 1 or 2 specific arts to begin with to focus on in your home. There's a deep magic written into the daily work of the home, which in its fundamental lines is always essentially the same across all ages and cultures. Or in any case, it's there to be rediscovered. If we're willing to make the effort to be countercultural and uncover something that, in a sense, human nature is always calling for. So what I'm suggesting here is, what's the argument? I'm actually writing a little paper on this now that is giving me an opportunity to think about things, about what a strange age we live in. You aren't going to find Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas making big arguments about how important it is to grow a garden, because everybody was. And they didn't have to run a drill of, gosh, what if the basic arts by which people have always taken care of the basic needs of life, the kind of crafts of husbandry and whiffery that have always in various forms graced the homes of human beings? What if there comes a point where by various forces and technologies and new valuations, those things have just been blown to smithereens, and now people have to look and ask themselves the question, do these things matter? Would I bother doing any of these things? Why would I not just make a lot of money and pay for people to do these things, and I get the products from them? That is fundamentally our life model now. And so you have to ask yourself the question, is this fitting for the kind of life that we want to have in our home? Or on the other hand, without going into talking about a lot of the ugliness, is a lot of the disconnection, loneliness, despair, meaninglessness, etc. of so many young people? Is it not deeply connected to the fact that they keep being fed the same stuff, the creature comforts, the various technologies, and they find it empty? It does not connect them to people. It does not give them a sense of their body. Indeed, it makes them obsessed with having their body look like something that I don't think bodies are even supposed to look like. They don't know what to do with their body. In the traditional arts, people know what to do with their body, and you enjoy it. This makes a difference. It's about people, and it's about life. I'm going to give you a short list of some specific arts to choose from. There's no absolute list. Here's a short list, and we're going to add more, and we'll talk about this more after lunch. Tilling the soil, tending animals, care for trees and plants in general. Pause, because that one's not so obvious. I just want to pause. There's an art of how you care for trees, regardless of whether there's any fruit on them or not. Men, not every man will know, but it's what a great art to know how to prune a tree, how to take care of a tree, how you would mulch a tree, how you wouldn't mulch a tree. This is simple, but it's profound. Care for trees and plants in general. Carpentry, especially in crafting the tools and the furnishings of daily life in the home. Hunting as a means of feeding, and so also butchering. Cooking. Beekeeping. I'm going to put this one in, just knowing how to produce and prepare fuel to primarily warm the house. It's just, you don't have to have air conditioning to live. You have to have heat. That's a short list. There's many more. Every one of them is very close to very basic human needs. Food, shelter. We could have put in there, making clothing, sewing things. Keep two things in mind in whichever specific arts we choose to focus on. Whichever one, two things to bear in mind. The details always matter. Take care in the little things. Make everything that you do reasonably complete and as beautiful as possible. God is an artist. God didn't make anything that's not beautiful. My father is a husbandman. He wouldn't make something and not at least give some attention to its beauty. Doesn't it just bring tears to the eyes to think of the kind of man for whom this is completely natural, non-reflexive? I mean, he can be in his death throes, and he's going to be keeping things neat. He's arranging them so that they are pleasing to anyone who comes and visits him as he's dying, because he cares. Second thing to bear in mind, prioritize the human hand. over technology. I'm not going to go into a long argument for it. I'm going to read you quotation number 8 from Wendell Berry, which I think points this out briefly but brilliantly. The means we use to do our work almost certainly affects the way we look at the world. Pause. That's an astoundingly good sentence. The means we use to do our work almost certainly affect the way we look at the world. I now suspect that if we work with machines, the world will seem to us to be a machine. But if we work with living creatures, the world will appear to us as a living creature. It does make a difference, and people may laugh at you, and they won't understand. Why are you bothering to do that? And what are you going to say? Picture the husbandman. Picture one of these men. You know, sometimes I picture one of those old farmers I met when I was young, one of those old timers. I picture them, put them in front of a classroom today. I mean, for goodness sake, and the young people, they won't know what they're looking at. And when the young folks say, well, why do you care about that? Why do you do that? Imagine his consternation. Imagine his befuddlement. He won't know what to say. It's who he is. He'll find himself wanting to say, you mean you don't? How can you not care for these things? You and I are in a different situation. You and I are going to have to be more intentional. In many ways, it's more challenging, but it's also super exciting. It's not going to flow out of our pores, perhaps, the way that it would. We're in a different age, and we're going to bloom where we're planted. A husbandman always blooms where he's planted. We've got to live here, but prioritize the hands. Aristotle calls the hands the tool of tools. On that, if you'll just give me 30 seconds, or 60, maybe even 90. Sophia, she inspired me to do this. She put together this handout that you're going to love. It's just a list of her favorite tools and books and all these things about the home arts. And I thought, wait a second, I'm just going to set up a table where I'm a little bit embarrassed to do this because I'm not that guy that's like, Mr. Tool Man. I mean, there's guys in the room right now that could make me look silly with any of these tools. But then again, who cares? That's not what you look like. I'm just going to tell you something I'm trying to do. This my son gave me for Christmas, and I still love this axe. I'm just going to hold something up for a moment. Both of them I absolutely love using. But this one itself has been crafted by an art. And when you pick it up, you feel that. And it makes you want to take care of it. So, I put a little lard on here for the off-season. And I just wanted to just stand before you and say something that you've heard before. They say the good tool is an extension of the hand. And we do good in the world with our hands. And there's something natural, kind of hard to put into words, about the tools that are an extension of our humanity into our work. And so splitting wood by hand has, I want to say, a husbandry aspect to it. It's not magic. It isn't just go out there and start splitting wood by hand and you're going to be a husbandman. Yes, there it is. It's much harder than that. But I'm trying to suggest we're talking about the principles. My dear hope is that we leave here with a stronger sense of why and a purpose, in a sense that it might be worth getting certain tools. I'm just going to hold up this one. Should have taken a little better care of this. My friend Mike Miller knows how to do some timber framing, and with my son Nicholas, we did some timber framing down there for a while. It never came to much, although it was a very, very special time for me. But this tool, just learning to use this tool, was such an incredible joy to me. I don't know what to say to you other than that this, which is a rawhide mallet, which is well made to go on this, when you come up to green wood and you learn how to use this, something inside of you sings. And I'll say that by and large, something inside a boy sings. It's deep and it's hard to put your fingers on. And I'm not saying it has to take any exact particular form, because it's not about a chisel, but it is about the human hands in knowing how to work in the world in a certain kind of way, beginning in your home, because it's always about people, and that's the kind of man you are. And I'm convinced there is a deep connection between the hand's work and that broader principle. Wrapping up, 3 quick, simple reasons. Again, kind of already said it as a wrap-up. Why is what I'm suggesting that we choose 2? I gave you 2 principles to bear in mind in going about doing it. In the afternoon, we can talk a little bit more about going into details and talk about specific ones. But why, again, is it so important? To choose to be a husbandman in your home and incarnate it in concrete arts is a way of constantly centering your life on what matters most. It's a way of constantly centering your life on what matters most, if you choose to have it be that way. It's going to keep revealing to you who you are as a man, and it's going to keep showing your children and, frankly, your wife what it is that makes you be a man. Not that can be reduced to any particular thing you do with your hands. It's a disposition that you incarnate in various ways. Second reason, husbandry unites a man to his wife. It constantly orients him toward her in a meaningful, rightful way. I'm going to give you one sign of that, ladies and gentlemen. This is a point that I love. You might find this a little bit out there. I'm just going to share it. And if it speaks to you, it speaks to you. Can't elaborate here. Wendell Berry at one point says, never heard anyone else say anything like this: the shared work of home between a husband and a wife gives sexual energy its home. It's a paraphrase. I'm going to say it again. The shared work in the home between a husband and wife gives sexual energy its natural home. We need not linger. Look around us, ladies and gentlemen. Sex has become utterly abstracted from life. But in a home where husbandry and wifery are a daily part of life, a man and a woman work together in bodily ways. And this is a profoundly natural context for marital intimacy. I'll go out on a limb and say one more thing and move on. I even would suggest that many fewer women, wives, would find marital intimacy the somewhat threatening and problematic thing that often they find it. were there more of a context where they worked together. That I take as just a sign of how husbandry unites a man to his wife by a natural design that you never could have made up, and we might even miss is there unless we really have our ear to the ground. And finally, husbandry is going to give a context for a father to be deeply involved in his children's lives. This is much more than just finding something to do together, ladies and gentlemen. We need more than just something, anything to do with our children, though something is better than nothing, of course. It's a matter of the natural context. It's where we're going to pattern for them what it is to be human, in how to live in relationship, in how to be a certain kind of person, how to be a husbandman. Our boys need to see that. Our girls need to know what a husbandman looks and acts like. Ladies and gentlemen, the art that gives direction to all this is the highest art, the art of crafting human life, of life crafting, of domestic prudence, of arranging everything in the home for the good of people. Husbandry names particularly how that is going to be incarnated by a divine plan. The broader art of forming a family, of forming a good life, has its natural expressions, its natural offspring in the concrete arts that we call the arts of husbandry and we call the arts of wifery. These concrete arts, if we practice them in our home, I suggest that life we so want is going to take root. The seed we plant is going to bear fruit. 30, 60, and 100-fold. Thanks so much for your attention. All right. I say this, 5 minutes if anyone has a question right now. I know that was kind of intense. And then we're going to give you a break. Sophia starts at 11:15, right? So why don't we take 5 minutes, then we're going to take a 10-minute break. Yes, my dear?
Make sure everybody knows there's a broader opportunity for question and answer.
And there'll be more opportunity for question and answer after lunch. We've just kind of left that kind of broad. But we have a little bit of, does anyone want to, it's totally fine if you just want to let that seep in. You don't have any questions right now, that's totally fine. But just take a little breath. And anyone have a question right now about husbandry, the arts of the home, anything that I said right there, please, Miss Townsend, Mrs. Townsend. I'll repeat the question after you said it. Yes, great question. The question was, can I connect more the arts of husbandry and wifery with virtue and holiness? It's the natural seedbed in which character grows. If we go back to the characteristics that we gave of a husbandman, this man who always takes responsibility. He's always looking to take care of others. You know what? And again, this was so striking to me as a boy in seeing this, that these men, like the furthest thing in the world from their minds would be ever to take something that was not theirs or to overcharge for something. It was so much a part of their fiber that they're going to do right by people. And if there's any question, if you were buying something from them, it's almost like they were going to bargain you down. No, I will not take that for this. It is not worth it. Kind of approach. But this is the seedbed of the most fundamental moral dispositions of righteousness, of care for others. So I'd say it very much is the context where virtue formation is going to go on. Just that we are thinking of others. So just think, I'm taking your question, which again is fabulous, of kind of, we want to be, how we're forming our children in character. In how we're doing these arts, again, so it's not just in the splitting the wood, it's not just in the cooking, it's not just in crafting these things, it's in that you're doing them as a husbandman does them. We've given the general way of characterizing that. If you're doing them as a way of taking care of people, you're doing them with the right moral dispositions. And I just say to you, I really do think it is the most obvious way that, in this case I'm going to say, a father conveys to his son moral rectitude. May I add, chastity is right there. Chastity so obviously goes hand in hand with husbandry. Unchastity is so obviously in anti-husbandry. You're putting yourself first. You're actually doing something very ugly. You're not taking care of people. You're putting, as it were, things over people. I say to you honestly, I think, I'll just put it to you this way. A boy who works next to his father in this kind of way, in this kind of spirit, and there's always human freedom. There's no absolute. He's being trained in chastity. Utterly convinced of it. Thanks for that question. Anything else? Please, Richard.
So, with regards to the quotation about working with our hands being preferred over working with machines or technology, I guess I'd ask, like, what is natural enough? Because even when you hold the hammer, there's
Yep.
whatever steel or iron is running that was a machine. That's a technology. And in a way, it seems like the development of technology is something that is human.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess, like, what is natural enough?
Okay, the question was, what is natural enough? And here's the thing, remember, this is why I think our taking a principled approach here is so important. I never want you to get lost in the details. I never want you to get lost in, like, dang it, I'm using an electric circular saw, and I'm not using that hand saw, and I'm failing my children. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to have more subtlety than that. If you think that's my point, then I done failed. You can form your child using a circular saw, right? But details matter. And we're coming at it with a spirit, partially because, I put it to you this way, partially because we're in a context where we are generally overrun by technologies that, as the philosophers put it, have not enhanced the human act, they have replaced the human act. That is the philosophical way of seeing the distinction. This right here, this doesn't replace the human act. This enhances a human act. To some extent, now again, don't start throwing things at me. I'm not going to make it, but I mean, I've told the story. I'm not going to embarrass. Well, then maybe I will embarrass myself. I'm just going to say it real fast. Look, I'm using a hydraulic splitter. I'm very proud to talk about this more after lunch. I said choose one or two. In the age in which we live, we're going to have a whole bunch of technologies going on in our household that don't fit. The point isn't purify your homes of technology. You can't use these things. That's not. I didn't say that, and I never will say that. But you choose one or two, Part of the reason I wanted to put out these beautiful things is your children are going to go for these. They're going to want to pick up one of these things. They're going to be dying to use one of these things. And they're going to want to be mentored by you in using them. They're not particularly itching to be mentored by you in using a hydraulic splitter, but they are itching to be mentored by you in using something by hand. So I would just say, look for the things that are a natural extension of the hand, that really connect you with your body, that have the sense of being a kind of art. And those are the things that are to the extent that you can go in that direction, it's a more fitting context to do the kind of things you want to do. Again, I'm going to keep saying to you, don't get lost in the detail, though the details matter. What's most important is real work in the home with a husbandman's spirit. But a theme that I am asking you to think about, because I'm convinced it makes a difference, is we've been given a gift in these specific arts that are more primordial, more original, very much still the fruit of technology in the broad sense went into making these things. And look, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how to use this. It's still a dream. It might not be the one that I ever figure out how to use. But it's fun for me to dream about it. Maybe I'm weird. Maybe that's not in your dreams. But I mean, just picture, versus, things blowing everywhere. Like, you got, it smells, and you got things, and you got stick things in your ears. If it just, whoosh, whoosh. So I want to see, I've got some of these for sale out back. I want to see you all mowing. Just kidding. And if you reduce it down to, Cutterback thinks we should be using scythes. I've done something wrong. But if there's something in you that says, if there's a place in my life where, for working with my wife and working with my children, I'm going to go for the things that, imagine, just you want to talk about working with someone, two people next to one another with that, those two people are together. You can't have two people pushing a loud lawnmower. So much of the work we do now with our technologies is completely isolated. The woman in the kitchen with her stuff tends to be isolated. I know a family that got rid of their washing machine, the dishwasher, so that they would do dishes by hand. We didn't get rid of ours, but we do most of our dishes by hand. You make your choices of things that are going to give you that context. We need to take our break now. We'll have occasion to talk about that much more. We're going to take a 10-minute break. We're going to start at 11:20. Thank you.